5. There is more to do on the right-hand side. Do I FOIL or do I simplify the inside of the parentheses? Foiling is something I usually wait on, so I'm going to distribute or work on the inside of the parentheses, not distribute. Secant is 1 over cosine. Tangent is sine on cosine. Still have the square there. I have the same denominator in the parentheses, so I'm going to combine this into 1 minus sine over cosine. Now I will do the square. I'll break it up so that I have 1 minus sine squared on top and cosine squared on the bottom. Okay. Notice your target here has no cosine. It'd be nice if I could get rid of that cosine. And I have on top 1 minus a sine, and on top of where I'm at so far is I have a 1 minus sine squared. So it'd be awfully nice if I could lose one of those. So I'm not going to distribute or FOIL the top. I'm going to change the bottom first. So 1 minus sine. I may FOIL. I can always come back and do that. The cosine squared, that is 1 minus sine squared. 1 minus sine squared is factorable. So on top I have 1 minus sine twice. On the bottom I now have 1 minus sine and 1 plus sine. All right, the 1 minus sine on the bottom is going to take away one of the 1 minus sines on top. So I have 1 minus sine over 1 plus sine. And that was my target. Number 36 looks like something similar. I'm going to clean up change the inside of the parentheses. Cosecant becomes 1 over sine. And cotangent becomes sine over, or cosine over sine. Same denominator. Still with the square out here. I'm going to make it where the top is being squared and the bottom is squared. Notice my target does not have a sign, so I want to get rid of the sign at this stage. So on the bottom, I can replace sine squared with 1 minus cosine squared. 1 minus cosine squared is factorable. It's a nice difference of squares. So I have 1 minus cosine squared on top. So that's 1 minus cosine, 1 minus cosine. I'd like to get rid of one of those. And on the bottom, I have 1 minus cosine and 1 plus cosine. So one of the 1 minus cosines on top will cancel with the 1 on the bottom, leaving me with my target. Number 37, I'm going to work on this complex, these tangent and cotangents. So cosine over 1 minus sine over cosine. I'm going to clean up that complex fraction there by multiplying top and bottom by cosine. So cosine and the cosine. Cosine and the 1. And cosine with the fraction with cosine on the bottom. Second thing, I'm going to get rid of that little smudge. Sine over 1 minus cosine over sine. I'm going to multiply top and bottom by sine. So sine times the sine is sine squared. Sine times the 1. And sine times the cosine over sine cancels the cosine. Okay. All right, something about these two denominators, they're remarkably similar, but they are opposites of each other. Cosine take away sine is the opposite of sine take away cosine. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep the first one, and I'm going to factor out a -1 from the second one. So that makes that into a negative sine, which is what I have over here, and a positive cosine, which is what I have over here also. And I have this right here. Now what am I going to do with the -1? I'm going to take that -1 and change the operation in the middle to a plus, or to a minus sign, from a plus to a minus sign. And I'm going to rewrite the second denominator so that it matches the first one, put the positive cosine in front and the negative sign in the back. Same denominators, so I can combine these into cosine squared minus sine squared, which is factorable. Cosine squared minus sine squared is cosine minus sine, and cosine plus sine. Over cosine minus sine. That allows the group cosine minus sine to cancel, so we're left with cosine plus sine, which I believe is the target. The target is actually sine plus cosine. You can stop at either one of those. Number 39, I'm going to change my tangent into sine over cosine. Notice my target is secant. Secant is 1 over cosine, so I need to get rid of some sine somehow. I'm going to get a least common denominator. Remember, secant is 1 over cosine. It'd be awfully nice if I could get rid of that 1 plus sine somehow. From cosine to cosine with the 1 plus sine, you need to pick up the 1 plus sine. So with my sine, I pick up the group 1 plus sine. From the second fraction with 1 plus sine, I need to pick up a cosine. I already have a cosine. I now have cosine squared. I'm going to distribute up on top. That is sine plus sine squared plus cosine squared. The sine squared and the cosine squared, I can replace that with a 1. So on top I have sine theta plus 1, and on the bottom I have cosine with 1 plus sine. Sine plus 1 is the exact same thing as 1 plus sine, so I can cancel the grouping and have 1 over cosine, and that is the exact same thing as secant, which was my target. Number 40, I'm going to change the tangents. So tangents becomes sine over cosine. Tangent squared becomes sine squared over cosine squared. Creating a complex fraction. Let's get rid of that complex fraction by multiplying top and bottom by cosine squared. That is my least common denominator. Cosine squared with a fraction that has a single cosine on the bottom will cancel 1. That'll leave me with a cosine to go with that sine. Cosine squared times the 1 on the bottom. Cosine squared with the fraction that has cosine on the bottom. And that problem worked out very quickly.